that I personally think that while technology is usually blamed as the cause for audience falling away, in fact, I think as journalists, traditional journalism has ceased to meet the content needs that we need to perform not only that basic function of giving us the information that we need to be free and self-governing. In times of upheaval, it has another role, which is to help us navigate through the kinds of changes that we're going through. Journalism that does that will be funded. There's no doubt in my mind, because the public will, to have that need met, will draw audience to it. And I'd say that there are some characteristics to that kind of journalism. And I think that we're seeing different aspects of this coming into being in the different experiments that are going on. One of them is the notion of journalism as a conversation, with the ability for anyone to publish that now exists. It changes the definition of who is a journalist. And I think that in the process of anybody being able to publish, that journalism ceases to be a one-way avenue of a handful of people setting the agenda, deciding on what stories the rest of us need to hear. And one of my favorite experiments that is actually a site that, an award-winning site, is something called Well Commons. It's developed in Lawrence, Kansas. And their goal in developing the site was to become the go-to place for news and information related to health and well-being in the region. And in the design of the site, they reached out to the public right up front. And one of the goals they set for themselves was that this site would have at least half the content coming from the public and half the content coming from professional journalists. And what they found in the process was that it changed the nature of the reporting that the professional journalists were doing, because the interactions with the public, the kinds of questions and areas of interest that people wanted to hear about, wanted to learn about, were inherently solution-focused. And because the journalists were listening, because they were interacting directly with the public, the nature of the stories that were getting told and where the investigative work was getting done was quite different.
You really do have to be versatile. You have to have your fundamental skills in place and be ready for new technology, be ready, be willing to pick up a camera. Even if you work at a newspaper, most newspapers now in the States all have their video departments, so there's this incredible blurring, and people don't say they work for newspapers anymore. It's because they're not newspapers, they're online, they're web. It's really a changed landscape, and you really have to be at least willing to learn all of these new technologies. And but keeping with all of the fundamentals too. I mean, that's the most important. You really are creating a brand for yourself, in a way. So you can learn the technology too. I feel like if you get the job and you can tell a story and you can tell it accurately and you're a solid, you conduct yourself in a solid professional manner, that'll take you very far, and then you can learn the technology along the way. But yeah, it's changing. It is changing.
You get to travel to loads of places. You go to places where people don't go, where everybody's coming out, you go in. You get a privileged perspective on the world, I think. And that's enjoyable. Has there been one moment that stuck out as being the moment, like, oh man, it was amazing? There's been loads of those little moments. Yeah, I mean, like walking into Kabul when the Northern Alliance took it and the Taliban retreated in 2001 was a huge emotional, kind of rush and a high. Being released from the Rixos after, a week or so of captivity when I thought I was going to be killed was an enormous, emotional high. And, getting in interviews with key people has been great at key moments, has been exciting. There's a lot of adrenaline in the business. I'm not the kind of person that's an adrenaline junkie. I don't really like going into dangerous situations. In fact, I hate it. Inevitably, you find yourself in dangerous situations. but I'm a huge addict to the adrenaline of getting out of those dangerous situations. Not getting into them, getting out of them is where I get my joy. You know, and you know, it's there's challenges. It's difficult to have a consistent family life, but you can do it. You can manage that. I think you've got to be strong-willed, and you've got to be quite resilient, and all these qualities to be a journalist these days. Entrepreneurism, opportunism, is in a positive way, not in a not screwing people over kind of way, but just seeing a gap and going for it is is an important skill to have. But no, what else would I do? I don't know.